The date is November 13th, and this is the first interview in the Pauline Trigere Oral History presentation. Pauline Trigere is a good friend, and she is, in many ways, a rare human being. One of the reasons I was terribly interested in doing this is because, as an admirer of the clothes that Pauline has produced over many, many years, there are whole elements that I never quite understood, and I had a feeling that perhaps there were other people in the world who didn't understand either. I was curious. I wanted to know more, and so I'm here. Pauline, the nature of this kind of interview is basically to produce a forever group of words, material, that will allow people for many generations to be able to go to a library and pull out and discover who was this woman, what did she do. Well, think of it in these terms. We have lots of pictures of Chanel sitting at her collections up the stairs looking through those bars down at the press and the buyers. But none of us have anything of her voice, anything of her intimate thoughts, anything of that sense of who this woman was, so that the nature of this is to do 3 tapes that are just talk tapes, as it were, and then 1 tape which will also be video, where one talks, but the camera will wander around and take a look at the atelier and whatever you like. In that sense, we will get visually who Pauline Trigere is at this point in time. This will also be locked in with all the available pictures and material that library research can produce. And we know that Lord knows, if one were to get every clipping about Pauline Trigere, you need a separate building. However, I would like to start with a very simple question, which is where you were born, date if you wish, date if you not wish, and tell me a little about who your parents were, and just take it from there. I want to know about you.
Okay. It's very interesting, but then maybe we can probably start making the beginning of the galley for my book that everybody wants me to write, okay? I can go back to your tapes and then...
Absolutely. You will have a copy of this, as a
Oh,
matter of
good.
fact. And other interviews I have done have stimulated immediately the answer by the person calling me up and saying, it's a book.
Yeah, well, if
Good.
it's a book that I never wanted to give at the time. I was born in Paris. I was born in the 9e arrondissement, the 9th arrondissement, which is right smack next to the Place Pigalle, which makes every American laugh, because if they don't know very much about Paris, they used to know about Place Pigalle. My father was a tailor, my mother was a dressmaker. They both came from Russia at different time. My father left Russia during a war. He was an apprentice, he was a tailor when he came to Paris. And my mother came many years later, so that's why I was born in Paris.
They were married in Russia?
Yeah, well, married in Russia. My brother was born in Russia, and he came as a little tiny boy with my mother. And so I was born, I know nothing else but my French education in the, what do you call it, public school, until I went to the lycée. My education is completely French, whatever is left of it. I never learned to speak English, as you can see or hear.
Did you learn to speak Russian?
No. No, because my parents, when they spoke Russian, they really wanted us children not to understand what they were saying. But I have a little, when I went to Russia, I picked up the few things that the stewardess, it was a very amusing experience, as a matter of fact. But that's besides the point. No, my father, I believe, never learned to read or write. Whatever he picked up in France, he did picking up from the newspaper. My father was a contractor for the Galerie Lafayette and the Bon Marché, like we have contractors here.
Oh, yes.
That's how he was making a living. And mother was a dressmaker. She was making custom-made clothes. So I was really pushed in the thing. My pocket money came from picking up pins or doing a few little menial things in the workroom, which in France was just back of where we lived. We didn't have a 7th Avenue and lived somewhere else. We had a rather big apartment, and the front part, or whatever, the back part, we had the dining room, the few bedrooms, and in the other part of the apartment was the workroom. And every time I came back from school, no matter if I wanted or not, it impregnated, let's put it that way. And that's how I watched my father cutting. This was my learning process, because I went to Lycée Jules Ferry and then Lycée Victor Hugo, to become a bachelor, to receive a Bachelor of Art degree, is that what you call it? Bachelor, yeah. And it just didn't work out like that. I wanted to become a surgeon, not only a doctor. Doctor, medicine always interested me. But I really wanted to become a surgeon. And this was my dream. And my father took a look at me and he says, "What do you mean you're going to go to those hospitals and play with dead cadavers, not me, men cadaver?" That was out and ruled out. So that's how I became a designer, quite by accident.
Was there any conscious training? Did your father say, "Look, and I'll show you how to cut," or
No,
was it just
because
your eye?
I'm just jumping the gun right now. It never happened like that. I saw my mother do what she had to do. I made for me a dress when I was 14 and a half, knowing absolutely nothing, but I had a vision. I wanted to have a special dress to go to some kind of a ball. My father belonged to a society of, what you call it, of goodwill, and the children had the junior things. And I wanted to be very chic, so I made but it had nothing to do with knowing what to do. I married very young, I wasn't yet 18 when my firstborn was born, when my first boy was born. But I was a housefrau, really. I never worked until
Who did you marry?
In Paris.
And
Who did I?
Yeah.
I married a Russian émigré also, who is, I suppose, still a very intelligent man. And I had 2 children with him. And he was the tailor. He was a tailor also. My father trained him a little bit. But
Was this an arranged marriage at that time?
No.
You really fell in love?
No. This man came to Paris. He was from Odessa, so was my father. And somehow, somewhere, old friends, we didn't have any communication with the Russians, then sent this young boy to my father as an apprentice. And he took one look at me. I was 13 and a half, and that was the end of me, you see.
He was older than you.
He was older than
Much
me,
older?
about 8, 9 years.
He waited.
He waited. My father, he waited a long time, and that's why. But so then let me just get the chronicler's order in it. My brother wanted to have, when I married, my husband was a tailor. I was really practically nothing. And my brother wanted to have a wholesale house, really like the pret-à-porter of today, but which was, in 1929, 30, that was kind of a very special thinking.
What was the name of the man you married?
Radley, Lazar Radley, R-A-D-L-E-Y.
Lazar, L-A-Z-A-R?
L-A-Z-A-R. The truth of the matter that years ago the name was Radzinski, which was a much prettier name. But when we came to America, we switched it to Radley. Here, you know all the story. So, and well, we were working a little bit. We bought a firm which was declining. A firm who was making some dresses or something. We bought it with absolutely no money, but we bought it. It was Boulevard Poissonnière, over the cinema, over the movie Max Linder. I will never forget it. And we started working there. And this led to a wholesale firm by the name of Trigère Maguet. It was funny at that time. Trigère Maguet was the combination of this house called Maguet, which probably was Marguerite or something. And we were in business selling wholesale prêt-à-porter to, I was only there very few hours a day just trying to sell. I wasn't designing or anything because my husband really didn't want me to work. He had this kind of European idea that the women should stay at home and
Have babies.
have babies. No, that's the truth. Well, from one thing led to the other, and we had a few fashion shows. My brother traveled everywhere, from Menton to Marseille to Toulon to Toulouse, all those French names, which are equivalent of Chicago, Pittsburgh, and the rest of it, except that the country is much smaller. And to go a little fast on those years, at the horizon, a man or a brute called Hitler appeared. And my husband, I must say, had the vision he didn't want to stay. He had the feeling that nothing good would come. And in 1937, we came to the United States for 6 weeks. We had a transit visa for visitors. We couldn't get. I could, being French. My husband was. He didn't even have a. He had what you call a. I might lose visa, a Nance, and he didn't even have a visa. We couldn't stay here because we came here for 6 weeks, en route to Chile. See the piano that I have here and the couch I'm here, all that came from France with us on the Santa Clara, the Santa Margherita, or the Santa Rosa, on the way to Santiago. But it came to New York and waited for us. I took one look at New York, the 6th of January 1937, with a tiny little hat and very high heel. I remember Rose Desca made my hat and it flew at every corner. It was so cold, the 6th of January. I never knew a cold like that. I never understood. And then we were at a little hotel, my brother, my husband and I, on 47th Street, some very second-class hotel, I forgot the name of, and we start going to 57th Street. Then we took those two-decker buses
Yes.
on the top to see the city better. And we took the bus from 57th Street down to 34th Street, which we were allowed for the 10 cents we were paying
On
then.
Fifth Avenue.
Fifth Avenue. Look, and then we proceed by going back. The first store I saw was on 34 or 36, 34, I think, and 5th, a store named Russex. You remember the name of Russex?
Yes, of course.
Well, we were eagerly looking at all those fantastic stores. And in Russex windows were 6 or 8 dresses, all navy blue and white. Mind you, it's January the 6th, 1937. It's freezing cold, and they have navy dresses with white piqué. Now, in France, we don't see that because we were doing the collection, to sell women. We were selling winter clothes in January. We were not making some. This was very intriguing to me because it said, our import, l'an 20, we paid, I forgot what was the price, our reproduction, that I remember, 1998. That was the price,
$19.98.
Yes. Then there was a dress from Lanvin, a dress from Molineux, a dress from Lucien Lelon. And I looked the actual dress bought in France and the copy. Well, that was something that I couldn't, it was a revelation to me because in France, if you did just a little bit of copying so much as a color, you could be put in prison. They had that kind of a trade protection, which we do not have in America. I opened my eyes, I said, I don't believe that. And the clothes in those days imported from France were about maybe $300-400, no more. And to see the copy that looked exact, I will remember pleated skirt with little white, anyway, so we continued to walk and we saw all those stores and we finally arrived at Saks Fifth Avenue. Now by that time I'm positively frozen. And in the windows at Saks, those peculiar window, very high, what is in the window but ladies, very sunburned in bathing suit, which I could sketch it today with big suns, a sun, glaring sun with glaring rays. I said, those people are nuts, or I don't understand them. By the time we got to Bendel, and Nixon Nelson, and Herman Patrick Tapé, all of that on 57th Street, going back to the hotel, I said to my husband, I ain't going to Chile. You can go. I'm staying here.
Oh, I love it.
And there was something that he said, are you crazy? We can't. I said, well, we found a way because this is something, it was unbelievable. So we went to see some family we had in Philadelphia. My mother had some brothers and sisters here. And my husband had a brother in Detroit, of all places, Detroit, Michigan. We went there. The city, which is pretty now, was an atrocity. Then it was a terrible town. It was, spaces with cars and cars. That was also, and two small kids who wouldn't drink even the milk because the milk here was so good and so straight. In France, everything was cut in half. Anyway, we stayed there. Watered down, that's the word. Anyway, we stayed in Detroit about a month. We came back to New York, and I was convinced that I had nothing to do in Chile. This was a country for me. And we start investigating to find out how we could stay. We had very little money. All the money that we had went into paying some not too honest lawyer then who took practically what we had. And we went to Canada. I went with my husband and my 2 kids, and my mother and my brother who were with us went a month later. And we re-entered the country completely legitimate with papers, and it took, 6 months. And in June 1937, we came back to New York, found an apartment on Madison Avenue, 1326. I lived there for 15 years. And then we found
Madison and what street?
94th. 94th was... The kids went to school at 86th Street, PS6. It's funny when I remember all that. And then we took a little place on 47th Street, 1 West 47, which is now the Longines building. It's 580 Fifth Avenue. We used to enter through 1 West 47. We had a room and a half. The back was the workroom, and my husband started making clothes. I was minding the kids at home, and my brother was the salesman, and he made a couple of coats or something. And we prayed. We tried to make a connection. The only people we really knew here was Adele Simpson. She's a very, very old friend of mine. That's another story, but I'll tell you why one day. And my brother went to see her. She says, well, I want to see what you're doing. So she came to see us at 1 West 47 with her sister, Anna Smithline Magnan. And they looked at us and she says, in this building, you cannot do coats and suits. In here you have to do dresses also, because it was so divided as it is today, the building for coats and the building. But 1 West 47 was a semi-couture and semi-this and semi-that. It wasn't really strictly wholesale, as we understand it today. And Adele and her sister said, but Pauline, you can make a couple of dresses. I said, well, I think I can. She said, well, you should, because if you have a rounded out collection, a couple of dresses, a couple of suits, and that's how I started, Robert. And
Did she send buyers to you?
No, well, that I don't remember. Probably, there was no threat, I'm sure. But this is because of Adele that I started, because my husband wanted me to be home, and that's it. Then also, since we had no market, and we didn't know the customer, somebody said you should travel. So Robert, my brother, took a suitcase full of, 24 pieces and started to travel by bus. Well, when he traveled, somebody had to watch the front door. That's how I got back into
business.
So I was in the front.
All right, let me stop here for a moment, because there is an element that I want to round out. You last said that you'd made a dress when you were 14 and a half to go to a junior ball, and you wanted to look chic. You have made no reference beyond that 14 and a half. Now you are a mother of 2 children. You are now living in America. You're about to make some dresses. Was there any dressmaking in between? Were you making clothes for yourself?
No. I made a few things for myself, or I decided my father, as I said, who was a tailor, who used to make something for me, and I would say I wanted this way. Well, yes, this is silly what I'm saying, because when I got married, I cut my own bridal dress, which I have the picture somewhere here. And in France you have the day for the civil marriage,
Civil ceremony.
Civil ceremony.
Yeah.
And then 3 days later, the big shishi with the temple and so on. I made for myself a green dress, almond green, and an almond green coat in a marvelous fabric like a velour with blue fox. I did all that, but this was an accidental thing because I couldn't find the clothes that I want. I really was very chic, I must say. I wore a little hat, which was a bonnet, completely covering it was very nice, with blue fox. So it was not an experience, I just cut dresses just like that. It's probably something I have in my hands, since I have no special training, as we see it today at FIT, where the student go through making a sketch and making a muslin and making under, for instance, my supervision and many other people. I had none of that training, Robert, at all.
You mean like Vianney, Mambochet, Balenciaga, you simply cut directly into fabric?
I don't think Mambochet did. I think Lanvin did. I think Vianney did. I think Balenciaga did. I don't know about Mambochet. I think Mambochet did sketches. And the difference in clothes is very extraordinary, because Mambochet make beautiful clothes, but if you look at them, there is not It's a different kind of invention. When you take a fabric and you drape it, I think I'm getting ahead of my story. I sketch sufficiently for me to understand where I want a pocket and where the button, sufficiently because I know exactly my proportion, but I will not give you a sketch to put in a book. It isn't pretty, you see. So I had this kind, and when I start making the dresses for the new firm of Radley Trigère right here at 1 West 47th Street, I think I had about 6 or 7 pieces. And we had no fabrics. I really made mostly woolen dresses, mostly on the bias. I thought that was...
The wool was the coat fabric?
No, the wool was a dress fabric. I couldn't touch the coats. My husband was the coat maker. I was the dress designer. So one thing led to the other. And that was 1937, 38, 39.
What happened to the 6 or 7 dresses?
Well, we sold them.
Who did you sell them to?
We sold them to Bergdorf Goodman, Saks Fifth Avenue, and then the stores around the country that Robert discovered as he went. Not the big one, you understand. I mean, there are millions of stores. We were not that expensive. In 1937, in 1937, the dresses probably were $29 wholesale, which meant $45 retail, since they didn't double in those days. And the coats and the suits, it was a...
Medium price line then.
Oh, yes, but it was not a cheap thing at all, because we made very beautiful sewing, and we worked with 3 people, 4, and then it went on and on. And then, when we started selling Bergdorf Goodman, I decided to go out and see some of the buyers with my special little coat, beautifully made, maybe a little bit different. It was, in a way, people said it was very French. Well, it was. We had no influence with the American designer here. There was no such a thing as American designer. They were American maker. Remember, in 1937, there were no designers per names. There were people who were making clothes. Mr. Adler, the building that we are on, the 2 buildings, was making shirts, blouses and skirts. Then he put them together. But who was him? If you go back, then you had Nettie Rosenstein started on 47th Street in 19 Messina. They must have started to be dressmaker and being known by 41, 42, 43. Because these women were making dresses for, your sister, your mother, your friend, and then all of a sudden the stores came to buy. That's how the system of ready-to-wear started in America.
What about a name like Hattie Carnegie?
Hattie Carnegie was a custom-made firm who in 1941 maybe opened a store, or maybe before that. And then, since she knew the value, Hattie Carnegie used to go to France and buy an awful lot of fabric, a lot of things that she was, that's what she was doing. She went to Paris and had the clothes copied. And in those days, Pauline Potter, who became the Baroness de Rothschild, you remember that woman with great taste? She used to adapt them, change this and change that. I think Norman Norell was working for Hattie, and the clothes were very expensive. At that time, she opened an under firm called Spectator Sport. I think she was one of the first one, with a man named Bruno something as a designer. But she still had her designer they were always influenced by the French, because she went to France and bought a slew of clothes there.
She bought clothes, actual...
But then she decided that the store was 49th Street, Hattie Carnegie Couture. And she thought that the clothes were a little too expensive to put into the boutique. So she had the idea, and she started this at 711 Fifth Avenue. That's another store, because I worked there later on. And she started a business to supply her own store. And as it happened, her good friend Stanley Korshak in Chicago said, "Well, why Hattie, sell me some too?" So she sold Korshak, and then she sold Magnin, and they were very, very friendly with the Magnin. That's how that thing started. Hattie was a fabulous lady. And but in those days, it was Hattie Carnegie with the influence of the French, and it was Spectator Sport, and it was Nettie Rosenstein. Now, Nettie Rosenstein did not go to Paris. They were making really dressmaker, the little black dresses, you know, the thing cut properly, beautifully made, and so on. I guess there must be many more that I don't remember. Then the makers of coats. Zuckerman came later. I don't know, I'm ahead of my story. Anyway, in 1937, we started this little business, and we went on until 1945, I think, 44? No. Wait a minute. I'm sorry. 41. When was Pearl Harbor?
41.
41. In 1941, I kind of separated from my husband. We were not divorced, and I was looking for a job because I wanted to work. By that time, I was a so-called designer, and my first job was with a firm named Ben Gershel, a coat firm. He had seen some of the suits that I made for me, and I went to work there. I had absolutely no knowledge of working for anybody. I've never done it. Working for myself, I came at the time I wanted, cut or worked until midnight. I had no rules, no direct, you know. So it was very hard. They gave me 2 assistants. I didn't understand them. They certainly didn't understand me. And I stayed there about 3-4 months, I guess. Their designer was a marvelous man by the name of Barbie, what's his name? He was a good friend of Norman Norell, charming man who was doing the whole collection, who told me, since I was in direct competition to him, he says, "You have great talent, Pauline, but don't stay here." Well, I didn't, because I couldn't get along with anybody. But I learned a lot. I found out how they put a swatch book together. The owner was Mr. Keski, who would always, at all time, had a big cigar in his mouth, always, and spitting all over the place. That's why I have spittoon in my place in the country, because of him, I guess. And I made pretty clothes, but they were out of their scope. The customers who came to buy the Ben Gershel line did not understand those very soft tailor suits which didn't belong in a coats and suit house. It was something else. We sold them very well somewhere else, but it's like today. You come to Trigère for certain things. You don't come to me to buy blue jeans, for instance. You don't come to me to buy men's shirts, since I don't do that. They come for a certain type of merchandise. Same thing with, so I was looking for a job, and I landed at Hattie Carnegie, I want you to know. I think it must have been August or September 1941. Now, I'm not a designer. I am a little assistant, $70 a week, and 2 small children. And I took the job because, first of all, I love to work and I had to learn. I had to be somewhere. I was the assistant to Travis Benton. Does that remember Travis?
Oh, absolutely. I first met Travis Benton when he was assisting Madame Francis. Did you ever know Madame Francis?
Sure, I knew Madame, of course. I mean, I was her guest many times. That's another story in Palm Beach.
Yes.
Travis, what happened is that Norell was courted by Mr. Trainer, who took him away on 7th Avenue. And then Jean-Louis was working for Hattie Carnegie. He was taken away by Paramount Pictures.
Yes.
And she had no one. Travis Benton, after Francis, came and did something for Lily Daché, who wanted to become a dress couture house. That didn't work out. So Hattie took Travis at $325 a week. That was in 1941.
A lot of money.
Yes, it was like today, $1,500, at least, maybe more. Well, I was making $70, but I took the job. And she had a little shop, a little place at 18 East 56th Street. where there was a hamburger heaven, I don't know, across the Harper's famous pharmacy, where Harper's Bazaar used to be, almost at the corner of Madison Avenue. So I got there. I had the back of the floor with 3 machines and a table, and the sketches of Travis Benton, who used to get, let him rest in peace, but he used to get really nice and plastered every night, and he used to come by 12:30, kind of dizzy, bring me beautiful sketches with trains going up in the air and plumes and things, and I had no idea what he was talking about, but I tried to make some dresses out of it. He came at about 12:30, took a nap until 1:30, went out to lunch, and that was the end of it. And every day at 8:30, Hattie Carnegie used to call me from her apartment, her beautiful apartment at 94th Street and 5th, to find out. She never came, but she knew what dress was in work. By the way, she never believed in women designer, never. I'll tell you that story later. She thought I was pretty good as an assistant. She says, what happened to the red dress in the second machine? She was an extraordinary person. And I had to give her the compte rendu, to tell her exactly what happened the day before. And I was making the collection, and until December the 7th, 1941. At that time, I was terribly happy with I got a raise. They gave me $5 more.
I made making $75.
I was making $75 a week, which was, I hope it's still warm.
That's fine.
So I told my 3.5 girls that for Christmas we will have a party. I was all excited, My mother was minding my children, was all right. And the 7th of December, you know what happened. 2 days later, which Magnan was it? Grover Magnan was a very, very good friend of Hattie, called her and he says, the Japs are at the door, closed your thing, this and that and the other thing, and so she got very panicky. On the 12th of December, something like that, Herman Carnegie, she had 2 brothers. Herman, I forgot the name of the other one for the moment, came in the dead winter and said that he was closing the place. And I said, well, what do you mean you're closing? He said, we're going to close. This was a little workroom besides what they had at 7-Eleven. Well, I didn't know what to do, really. He said, you can stay until the end of the year and finish up what there is to do. And I will never forget it, Robert, that my Christmas party consisted of 1 bottle of Cinzano. In those days it was 78 cents, I think, or 70. That's what we had, with the 3 girls, and we were all crying, saying goodbye. And that was the end of me and Carnegie. Well, now I have to do something. My brother was then working as a traveling salesman for Rodier and all French houses of material. And I had very good friends in Boston who invited me to come and spend Christmas and New Year's. I said I couldn't do it at Christmas, but I went there for, it never happened to me ever since or again. I went to Boston. Ruby Newman and Seal Newman, he had an orchestra. They were very dear friends of mine. And we had drinks, they had children. I was very low. And we were drinking wine, and I must have drank a little too much or something. I fell asleep for 24 hours. I never woke up. They let me sleep. 24 hours, I was asleep. I wish I could do it now. When I woke up, I don't want to tell you that it was like Joan of Arc, but it was something like that that happened to me, that I said, I've got to do something for myself, and that's what I'm going to do. I came back to New York on the 4th of, this was the 2nd or the 3rd of January, and the first thing I did was to ask for an appointment with Hattie Carnegie. And I went to see her on 49th Street, and I told her that my position, she was sorry to let me go, and so on and so forth, but that's what she could do. She, was very worried about the future.
How old was Hattie Carnegie at this time, approximately?
Maybe 60, something like that. I don't remember how old she was when she died. I don't know, it's easy to, I forgot. She was petite and terribly chic. And I said, Miss Carnegie, I would like to do this, and would you help me? She says, what do you mean help you? I said, well, if I make some clothes, would you buy them for me? She says, if they are good, we'll buy them. If they are not, I wish you luck. I said, thank you, Miss Carnegie, but there is another thing I must ask you. I have no place to go, I've got no machine, and it was, immediately war, everything was restricted, you couldn't get pins, you couldn't get nothing. It wasn't like the oil today, it was really pretty serious. I said, could I please occupy the place that you have at 18 East 56? I will pay half of the rent, since in the front part of the building, or the back part of the building, she had an embroiderer, she was doing beautifully embroidery. And the man who was doing all her embroidery was sharing that place with me. She says, I don't see any difficulty into that. So I became the tenant of Hattie Carnegie for $50 a month. They were paying $100. And that little situation lasted until February. I made a collection. I got 9 cuts of fabrics from Rodier, Meyer Woolens. I had no money. But I did have 2 diamond clips, which I wore last night, by the way, and a diamond barrette that came to me because of the birth of the 2 boys. So I pawned that, and I got $800. And my brother decided to quit his representation of the woolen people, and he would come and we will be in business. Little did we know what it was to be in business. So I made 11 dresses, and he started traveling. These dresses in 42 it was, were by then $39 wholesale. The first people who bought them was Nan Duskin in Philadelphia. The second was Polly, which is now Evelyn Burns. And the third was Carnegie. This is the way we went. Anyhow, middle of February, Herman Carnegie came up with a cigar, and he says, we're closing. We don't want this, we're closing. It was like a bomb. If somebody told me today, I don't know, I cannot explain to you what this did to me that day. It was, the whole ceiling was falling on me.
Your world was collapsing.
Absolutely. And I didn't know what hit me, and I said, well, I'll take over the full rent, $100 a month, When you don't have any money, I tell you, it's a lot of money. Everything is a lot of money when you don't have it. That's very simple. And that's the way we started, Robert. I will never forget when the embroiderer left. They have some machine drills to make the design, like the dentist drill.
Yes.
They were all hooked in the ceiling. They took their machine, but they left those wires hanging down. We put hooks on it. That's the way we showed our dress. We had Miss Carnegie allowed me to keep the few dummies. I paid for, I forgot how much. I have the bill of sale somewhere. And I bought 3 machines from Hattie Carnegie and some screens, which I still have in my house in the country. I never wanted to part with those screens because they were the partition from the future showroom to the workroom, I don't know. I
think that kind of sentimentality is lovely. I think it shows the very direct character of warmth and belief, and it also shows this kind of vulnerability. We don't like to give up the things
it was
that
strange.
are really
I
part
kept
of our
those
lives.
damn screens. They were full of holes. I transported them in the country and the first desk I bought, it was all very cheap. But you see, my main difficulty after that was not finding the workers. We had them, as long as we had enough money to pay for their weekly salary. But to get pins, I couldn't get pins. Adele Simpson.
The war shortages, of course.
So we used to take the pins at night, and we used to put them in some liquid, some alcohol it's not allowed. With the union, the pins on the floor are not supposed to go back on the tables, that. Today, it's not allowed because they don't want the workers to get an infection and they're putting the pins in their mouth or stick themselves or whatever. But in those days, my dear, we picked up all the pins because we didn't have any. And the thread, it was very difficult to get all the trimmings and things like this.
You put the pins in alcohol
To wash them up from the floor.
Antiseptic, I see, like surgery. Well,
Like
you were creating your own hospital.
So and then my very first it was like the 100 days of Napoleon, I guess. I cut my first 100 dresses myself. Now, during the war, it was a small building. The elevator stopped at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. We ran it ourselves after hours because we had to work. We worked 11, 12 hours, 14 hours a day. I'm very amused today at the hours that we work, 7 hours a day. You know, union rules, 7 hours a day. That's what we work. When I think of the time I spend cleaning, sweeping, I mean, I've done everything in the place for a long time, you know, until we could afford somebody to do it.
Of course, it is the great illusion of the world that when people are successful, it becomes the star. But always one thinks the star is born overnight, that somehow or other one is tapped.
It can happen if you are a singer or an
Yes,
actress.
in today's world of communication it can happen. But certainly in the whole history of fashion, there really are no overnight stars that have remained shining. There may have been some successful fads.
That happens.
But
I think
my point basically being that I think when you talk about the number of hours to be worked each day and the changing in the current patterns, it is important, I think, for young people to understand who are starting out, even now, within the limits of that work period. You know, the fact that there is a 7-hour or an 8-hour workday, the real success comes from being able to extend your work, whether it be reading, whether it be going to see things, whether it be looking at old magazines, books.
In fashion, I think that you must be interested in all way of lives, the theater, the concert. Today, when I teach at FIT or Parson, and you see the young group of young people, they are 19, 20, 22, I'm sure their motivation is great. I'm sure they feel, but really what they want, Robert, is to be the designer with the name in the papers, launching at the Grenouille and being seen at the premiere. All of that comes maybe, but it isn't given immediately. I worked very hard. I still do, long hours. But it was, I don't remember having, you know what, I think I get more aggravated today than I was in those days. In those days, I was young and hopeful. I never set my course to become a great designer. I just had to make money to live. That was the only thing that was interesting me. I had to eat. I had to support 2 kids and my mother. And this is all I cared for, to really be able to sustain myself. I didn't set my course and I'm going to be a great designer. That came later. Not too much later, as a matter of fact. Because within 2 years, a year and a half, we took over another floor at that 18 East 56, still running this damn elevator up and down. We had the keys to the building because the elevator boy left, you know. And I remember that I employed a cutter who was working down 7th Avenue, who used to come to my place at 5:30, and he worked until 9 o'clock to cut the thing that we had one by one. What did I know about patterns? I learned, my dear. My technique and my knowledge of patterns today and of fit comes only from my own doing. I learned my mistakes. I know where a seam should go, where it shouldn't go, and that was, I hope, the Trigere clothes fit. That's a very important thing. You can make the most beautiful design. If the woman cannot move in it, forget it, you know. It's got to also be functional. So all of that, you know, the training process was very interesting.
Did you sell as well at that time?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because I always,
Sure.
you know, my
Oh, sure. I said, you know, the day before yesterday in the show, we were absolutely overloaded with people, and one customer came late and the other one came early, and we didn't know what to do. It happens in market week. And so we had to put another little table, and one of the girls said, why don't you start with this customer? I said, you know, it's not the first time, but it doesn't intrigue me so much now. I do sell, I compose, let's say, when we have windows, Bergdorf or anywhere, I am in it to decide. But selling per se, I don't do that anymore. I haven't got the time. And I just don't see myself. Once the garment is done, hopefully I like it. I hope it's going to sell, that's all. You know, if it doesn't sell, if I love a dress very much, it doesn't sell, I'm heartbroken. But I learn to do another one quickly. Oh, I don't know. It goes back soon enough. In 1945, we were cramped for space, so we moved to 37 West 57th Street. And we had a big place. You know, it wasn't so big, but it was enormous compared to when...
When you walked in and looked at it, you thought, what have we done?
37 West 57th is a big building, which is now, I think it was bought by Life, or Time Life Building. I forgot. And we stayed there about 4 or 5 years, and then we moved to 19 West 57th Street until we took the place that we occupy now since 1952. We moved on 7th Avenue. But in 1945, the war, so we went into the war, and then we declared peace.
Did you have any government contracts at all during the war?
No.
No.
We were
You were still doing essentially semi-couture clothes?
Semi-year, because we cut everything almost by hand. It still does the same way, but could it be for you? No, we never had anything. No, we were too small. But we had, you see, what we had is a workroom right where we had the showroom. It's only when we moved to 19 West 57th Street, next to Longchamp, that we took our first contractor, who is still with me today. He, and then a second contractor, we still have them today, but for years, we just did everything in the back of the, you know. And then we presented collection, I don't know. In 1949, I got my first Coty Award.
49?
Mm-hmm. It's a long time ago. And then the Return Award I got in 1951, and then in the Hall of Fame in 1958 or 9. I have to check that. So I'm in there for the, you know.
Go back a little in terms of, you know, we see the obvious development of this, and some of it was motivated by pure survival, and but also I feel the inevitability of talent. I have always felt that about the people that I admire, that whether they did it here or there, it would erupt. It's like a volcano. It has to come up to the surface. It will manifest itself in some way. I've always maintained that if you threw Pauline Trigere into a desert island with a group of people and a monsoon swept all their clothes away,
yes,
she
you're
would
right.
stand there and she would find some way to take the pebbles, the bark, the leaves, and she would put it together, and everybody else would be saying, "Oh, Pauline, make that for me." You know,
no,
how did you do
that? That is true. I don't know, because it's like today too, when you say to people, when I went back to Paris with my clothes, my American clothes, my French friend, they were quite surprised to see what we did here, because the French, I was born one, but they have this kind of a superiority complex that we cannot do good things in here, which is a total, how do I say, it's false, you know. We do beautiful clothes here and we do them well. I don't know, you know, Robert, one thing leads to another. When you said something before that you can have a star overnight, you've seen those examples of a young star, a young designer, making a marvelous collection, and then the newspaper praise it to the hilt. Terrific, fine. This is divine if you can make a second collection. But if you don't, forget it. You've seen it happen many times. I think the survival is very important. The continuation of what you are good at is very important. For me, I'm as good as my next collection today too. Never as good as the last. You have to just go on making the thing that you do the best and try your best always.
I think the key may be in just what you said. To find the thing that you do best, to be able to create an individual, original statement as opposed to a copying statement, either of yourself or of someone else.
Well, I think we have that in my firm. I think people know what Trigere means. I think they come to us to get the Trigere, and I think there is a certain stamp which...
Right. You say that you think people know what Trigere means. What do you think they think Trigere means?
They think they mean, first of all, a quality of merchandise. A quality of workmanship. The design comes, of course, with it. Not everything I make I think it's saleable. We don't sell everything, of course, but I think that after the years I've learned what my customer wants. It's always simple, at least on the surface. It's got intricate cut, dots that are invisible. I don't like dots that point to a bust or to a hip. We try to eliminate that or to hide it. I think that comes from the fact that, first of all, I fit on a live model and I drape on a live model, and so I'm able, it's a little bit like sculpting. I think that probably one day, if God permit me or give me the time, I would love to sculpt. I love to paint, but I would love to sculpt because I think I can do things with my hands, and this is really what I do. And when you do a sketch, now I'm not belittle the sketching ability or talent of you make a sketch and you give it to an assistant. It's never the same than when you take a piece of fabric. You do other things with a piece of fabric that you let hang and drape and form, I think. I do some sketching too for the coats, for instance, where they have a certain seaming and it's more classic. I think the people come to us for, well, how do I say that? It's not going to have she's. I think it will have a durability. I think the people buy Trigere because it has all the quality of sturdiness, but also a design that will be wearable for more than one season. I say that each time that I make a collection, we have clothes that disappear in the first season if they are a little bit extravagant or so, but most of the clothes that we do, that's the thing that I hear all the time. I have a quote of yours only a week ago. Carol Gimbel, you know Carol Gimbel-Lebworth, whom I haven't seen in 5-6 years, said, I didn't recognize her. She was blonde, now she was brunette. She says, I've got a quote of yours of 10 years. I said, my goodness, everybody tells me the same thing, but am I supposed to do starve in the meantime? No, it's fun. I like when people tell me that. I think they are. I love when people say that they wear the clothes with pleasure and they enjoy them, and it is stand by themselves, I think. It's difficult for me to express things.
Well, I can tell you one of the reasons that I was curious as to how you would respond to the question as to what people think of as Trigere is that in my experience, talking to people over many, many years about various designers, the thing that has always come up when your name is brought up is a reference to the fact that if you see a retrospective of most designers, there are many things that are almost laughable, many things that become sort of she couldn't or he couldn't have designed that, nobody could have worn that, because it is out of context with the climate of the time.
Yeah, it's true, I think.
And yet more people have said to me, and I felt it once I went to see Without Your Knowing, you did a presentation, it was out of town, I think it was in Houston or some Texas town, and I was there and I went to see what you were doing, and you presented some things from 1943 up, and what struck me at the time, and that's been reinforced by other people who have mentioned this to me, that in that collection there were an extraordinary high number of things that could be worn today. Now that today was like 7-8 years ago, but I have a feeling that the same thing would apply today.
All right, I can tell you what I've done. It's all right with the tape to say things.
Anything you want.
Last week we had the show for the spring, and we saw all those things coming from Paris. I mean, I saw the pictures. I was interviewed on the phone. What do I think of the short dress and what do I think of the collection? I always avoid an answer because I'm cagey. I always say I don't know the collections. I only see what this reporter and that reporter chooses to select in the Parisian or Milan, the Italian collections. I don't know that if I had been there, I would have selected that particular dress or coat or suit. I may have found something that, I like. I thought the clothes were outrageous, some of them, the way they were photographed, the way the photograph, So, but I did something after my 8 models came out with the first group of Trigere clothes. I made this outrageous statement. I stopped and I said, I've got to tell you all that Lucy and I, my assistant Lucy Porges with me many, many years, we were kind of bewildered by this length up down, mini, call them what you want. And I got myself a little bit upset, since we don't do clothes like that. But at the last minute, I decided to put in this collection a group of clothes with all kinds of lengths, and you are going to tell me after you see them, if you like them, we'll put them in. We'll put them in the collection. If not, we'll just destroy. And art came out, the same girls, with dresses from 1949, 52, 62, and brought down. They were not that short. But I want to tell you that 3 of the dresses, where everybody wants them, I should put them in the collection in the fall. They are absolutely superb. They really are. And as I took the clothes from, we have what we call our own museum collection that we keep in our cutting room. My girls, my boys went to get me a big group of clothes, and 2 things came back. One is a coat dress I made for myself in an hobby. When I went to Japan, I bought hobbies. I made a coat dress, and it was so superb that I wore it 2 weeks ago at the Voice Foundation, a big black tie things, and everybody says, "My God, Pauline."
I saw you there.
Oh, but of course. Well, that dress, that was 19, you know, this is 1964. 1964, I didn't touch it, Robert. Thank God I'm not, maybe a little fatter. 2 days later, I wore a black broad-tail dress with fox at the bottom, which I didn't touch. Absolutely superb. And I decided, it's all right, so people laugh. I said, I haven't seen that in that collection. Let's say Mrs. Kissinger saw me at her own house. She said, I haven't seen that dress. I said, honey, I didn't know you when I made that one, because this one was 1968. I wore them without touching a thing. So it isn't that I want to wear the old clothes, but it's satisfactory to me that I knew how to do something that I'd... they were not ridiculous, is that what I mean? There is not one that's ridiculous. Maybe the few that we can show are the ones that are very short, who came back to me from different customers. You know, we keep every season, we keep 2 or 3 of the things that I think are representative of each collection. So, you know, it's endless.
Do you have any difficulty selecting those 2 or 3? Mm-hmm. Because they are babies in a funny sort of way, aren't they?
They are, and some we keep, and if I have something very special that belongs to me, that's no problem. But women know that in the country, and they will gladly send me an old Trigère, which I take with great glee, you know. So we had so much 2 years ago that I sent an awful lot of things to all the museum. We have a good representation at Museum Costume right here, we have in Philadelphia, everywhere we have clothes. And I hope that there will be a good lesson to the student, because the cut is remarkable. My problem was that I didn't know how to conserve those clothes. You know, you're not supposed... I wanted to borrow some clothes from the museum here. They don't let them go. They said that it spoiled them if they change temperature and all that business. I didn't know that.
Yes, they treat them like rare
We
objects.
don't. You know, we have them in those bags, but they last. But all in all, it's fun to see, because we have a dress in the collection that I showed one of a girl who worked for me, who now is very successful in her own right. She's in the bag business. Riva, you know Riva?
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Riva she worked for us a long time ago. She had a dress which became too short. She gave it back to me. I showed it last week. It is so beautiful. It's all on the bias, black and yellow and white. It's cut, but divinely. I don't think I could do it today. It's very difficult. In those days, we had drapers who knew how to put the material. Today you have to go more machine and less handling. You know, we don't have the workers we used to have. They all retire. You see, the schools, they teach everybody to become a designer, but nobody wants to sew. Nobody wants to cut. Nobody wants to make a pattern. They don't want to do that. The glamour is not attached to it.
It is interesting that, as you know, I teach at FIT also, and I always open up the first lecture and look at this class, all of whom come to be designers, and I ask them to take out their pencils and their pads and please list for me 25 names of designers around the world. And of course they can't do it.
They can't?
No. As a matter of fact, you find it not so easy to do yourself. In terms of living designers that are functioning today.
Well, 25 is a lot, yes.
You get to 12, 14, 15, and then you begin to sort of try to think of names. And my point is that there's no way in which every school, every session, every semester, every school around the world that has fashion classes is going to produce a name designer, or you would have no difficulty naming 25 designers.
Well, yes, also the name designer is kind of vastly overused, if you want to. You know, they are makers of clothes, they are people who are adapters of very good trends, and they are very successful in their own right. Because they know exactly what to do in taking a line from here and there and so forth and so on. It's rather difficult. I have another contention with the school. I teach a class which is about 20 to 22 students, and I begin, as you do, tell me what you want to be. There's a dead silence after 5 minutes when they relax a bit. What do you want to be? I want to be a designer. And everybody wants to be a designer. I said, fine. Now here we have 22 of you. And there must be 5 classes that are going to graduate from this school alone. That makes 100 future designers. And then there is Pratt, and there is Trapegan, and there is Parson. That makes 500 designers per year on the city of New York. There are not enough customers for all those future designers. There are none. They may go into other things. It's a strange, I think it's very difficult.
Do you suggest other things they can go into?
Yes, there is a lot of things. Listen. We lack merchandise people, we lack salespeople, we lack, I don't know, so many things. Not everybody can be a designer.
No, I've tried to communicate to them, and I think I'd be interested in your reaction, that the understanding of clothes, or the appreciation of clothes, the excitement of clothes, the fantasy of clothes can be applied to advertising copy, to illustration, to stage design, to window display. All of these things require, if you do them brilliantly, some understanding of clothes.
Also, a willingness to work hard. This is one thing I stress all the time. It's very rare that you see a young person coming in and become the fashion designer that he or she wants to be right away. There is a period of adaptation. You have to work. I think it doesn't come just like that easy. It's tough for them, I'm sure. And I had two examples. The boy to whom I gave the first prize in my last class last year is Chinese, I think. Chinese, speaks very poor English, and I gave him and he came to work. He wanted to work at Trigere. So he came for a week, and the boy is talented. He makes beautiful sketches, and he has something in the sketches, and he executed his costume brilliantly. I mean, it was well done, and it was very complicated. That I can describe it to you in pants, trousers very tight, and a bra that it's difficult, and a coat on top of that. And he did all that very well. And he came to us, and he stayed a week. And he reminded me of me when I was at Ben Gershel, because anytime I went to one of the halls to go to the shipping room or to the material room, he was always looking at something that he wasn't supposed to look at, but it showed interest. He looked at the swatch book, he looked at the way we put the material together. I mean, he was very interested. And on Thursday night, he started on a Monday. I said, do you like it? He says, no much, nothing, like that. And I said, what does it mean? He says, I want something else. I want more quick, more. I said, what do you mean? He says, when I go back to Hong Kong, to his family, who apparently has a factory or two of clothes, he wants to be able to produce en masse and something. So I said, well, I understand that, and I wish you luck. And he says, I'm not coming tomorrow. I said, yes, come tomorrow and finish up the toile that he did. It was very hard for him to make the muslin of something we gave him. He could do his own sketch because he had which I understand. But what we gave him, he couldn't do. So he came back Friday, and I said, we pay on Tuesday, I'll send you a check. He says, no check, nothing. I said, what do you mean? We don't, He says, don't want. I learn here more in 1 week than the 3 years at FIT. And I tell you, I blushed for joy because that was nice, and I'm sure he did. And
sure. What all students, I think, have to also remember, however, is that you are prepared to learn more in the 1 week as a result of a lot that you've been exposed to in an academic situation. You come to
sure.
a school and you know nothing. You just have an image. I think you put your finger on it before when you said that people, they want to go to the premiere, they want to lunch, they want to be interviewed, they want the picture in the paper, they want to win a Coty Award, see their clothes in a Fifth Avenue window. Very often I find that students do not understand, and I would like your reaction, that even the technical things that they learn are not the total process of education. You have to understand the world that you live in. You have to be able to evaluate the lifestyles of the forces that you're going to be designing for.
Listen, it's like everything else. There is a learning process. I suppose it exists even if you are a young writer. I guess that you learn to pare down your phrases, your sentences. In the clothing business, it's a different thing altogether. Lots of things play. The price of the garment, the material you're going to use, what you want to do. I think that school doesn't have enough time to tell these young people of the difficulty that they're going to encounter. I think they are not prepared not to be a success right away. You see, I never had to do that. I really had to work all the time, so I can understand their worries. Worry, no, it's not the worry. I don't think they know that. It's difficult to explain.
I find that I keep trying to encourage them that it is imperative that they know what people are watching on television, that they know what furniture is being designed, that they know what architecture is doing in terms of direction, where lighting is going to enter.
What do they say to that?
Well, they look at me, absolutely blankly, but there's always, the reason I stay doing it is that almost every single class there is at least one or possibly two people who are hanging on the every word that you say and come and ask for some direction. Simply
That's
say,
good.
Give me a book.
Well, yes.
Which magazine? And you find yourself thinking, well, if you get one or two each semester,
it's satisfactory.
That justifies all the other
Sure.
work. And perhaps it affects people in different ways that
Well,
you're not
listen,
aware of.
there are my youngest son who's been teaching Russian for the past 10 or 12 years, who has his doctorate from Harvard, who's been decided 4 years ago that he wanted to become a lawyer. And he just took the bar examination. We don't know if he has passed it or not. He's not as young as he used to be, like everybody else. I know the effort it was for him to go back to school every night while he was teaching. 5 nights a week to go back, especially being a lawyer. We'll see. Now he's going to become a lawyer. I hope he's going to work in a law firm. But it's been very difficult. It's been relinquished dinner invitation, not going to the movies as much as he wants with his young wife, or maybe watching his little daughter as much as he wants. I am in great admiration of my son Philip to have done that, but he wanted to. And it's funny because when he left Harvard, he went to the University of Chicago to become a lawyer. And he stayed there a year and a half, and he said he couldn't take it. It was too dry. He didn't want to. When he came back here at Thanksgiving, he says, I don't want to. I said, Philip, over my dead body. I thought it was a whim of a young man, and I was all alone paying for the... Jean-Pierre was at MIT. He decided he wasn't going to go anymore to school. I said, no. I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to learn Russian. I said, never mind that. Well, he went back to Harvard, and he told his teachers, and at that time, the Russian, problem was starting at the horizon. They said, Philip, if you come back to us, we will give you a scholarship. So he did that too. So he got, I paid for the clothes, but I didn't pay for his study. He left the law school after a year and a half, and 15 years later, 12 years later, now he's done it. So everything is feasible, I guess, if you really want to.
I've always operated on the principle that if you really want it, but you must really want it,
Yes.
you will find the way to produce some relationship to it. It doesn't mean that if you really want to be a star that you're going to be a star. It means, however...
but you see, I read yesterday at the hairdresser the story of Bette Midler, whom I never saw live myself for a reason or another. And now she said that everybody wants to know why she started in the bath, you know. Did she perform in the front of people with towels? She says, so what? I performed just the same, and they gave me my first audience, and that's what it was, you know. I mean, you have to have the reaction to yourself, I guess. As I said, you see now, if you wanted to sing like Bette Midler, she knew what she wanted to do. It must have been hard. I don't know, I was making clothes. I wasn't going to be a designer. I was just making clothes, Robert. It came out that I had...
To make a profit and to earn...
to earn a living. It turned out that God gave me, the super element up there gave me something in my hand, and I'm thrilled that I was able to do it. But I think, I probably would have gone into home decoration. I think I could have done that. I think I could have done, I could have become a chef, a cook or something. Well, not like you, but I could have, if I wanted to. There are many things that I would have liked to have done. I don't want to, but I think that if I really had to, I would have done something else.
I feel
maybe.
Exactly the same way about my own career.
Absolutely.
My own position. And I also recognize that if you are a person who has, you used the word early in the conversation today, saying that even when you were very young in Paris, you knew that you had chic.
Yes.
You know,
well, I hope that I still have it today.
You certainly do, but my point is that
I was a little bit always different than the kids at school.
This,
always.
I love the use of the word different.
I was a little bit different. I cannot tell you why, but I was. My mother dressed me. It was different than buying a dress at the Galerie Lafayette or wherever you bought dresses from. Also, I did not have any hand-me-down like the big family in France, that you had a bigger sister, you wore a dress, you know, at school you were not that... and we didn't wear uniform at the first. I never went to school where you had to wear uniform, so you really had to wear clothes. Or except at the Lycée Jules Ferry, you had to be in beige smocks. They were awful, I remember. That's all.
I think what I'm trying to get at is that difference that you refer to, the fact that one is different, is really the first reflection of real style. Because style is the individual statement. It is not the statement that everybody else is identified with.
Style. Now, how would you define fashion versus style?
Well, I think that style is motivated by the individual expression, which has little to do with whatever the large group of people are responding to. And fashion is that which has been accepted by a large number of people.
That's exactly why I feel, yeah. Fashion is what they say you should do, and style is what you do yourself.
If you are capable of doing it.
Yes, if you are capable of doing it.
See, I've always felt that the designer who is really good is the person who is able to translate their sense of style into the garment and create it so that it's saleable, so it doesn't depend upon them.
No, I know also, I learned fast enough. For instance, when I started I will always remember Mrs. Blum in Chicago, one of the most extraordinary chic stores. I mean, it was like Carnegie here. Mrs. Blum, who said she discovered me. She did not, but anyway, she was a very good customer. Used to tell me, don't put all that thing in the back of a dress. A woman who's going to look at herself in the mirror is going to pay for what she sees in the front, and not necessarily, I mean, it's very funny. I mean, all right, you have a train, but this always stuck to my mind. Don't put too much work in the back, because the woman is not going to see it unless she really starts looking at herself in a three-way mirror, which is my recommendation at all time to anyone. And then, as a woman, the practicability of putting on a garment, I learned that fast enough because I have a very, very fast-moving life. I come in at home at 6:30 to go to an open. They used to be 8 o'clock, the openings, now they are earlier. And I knew that whatever I had to wear had to be put with one zipper and not to have so many buttons and things, because that's impossible. That I learned with the process of dressing myself. I remember Mrs. Blum telling me, don't put so many scarves. The American woman doesn't know what to do with a scarf. I said, well, she can learn. And they say that a scarf around your neck or a scarf around your shoulder is typical French, that the French ladies know how to do Well, now the American woman has learned a lot, but I'm talking about 20 years ago.
Well, it's always interesting. I once said about men wearing ascots that the way to check whether it was the thing you should do or not was if you put an ascot on and the first person you met asked you when you hurt your neck,
Oh
you
my
should not wear
goodness!
it. Because there were many men that put on ascots, they made it look like a bandage.
That's
And
funny.
whereas if you can wear it so that it is an extension of the
Yeah.
total outfit and doesn't seem to be something which is superimposed upon you. Style by its nature creates a total image.
Well, in your book you can read all this, and if everybody would have. I hope you have it reprinted and give it to your student, the first class student.
Thank you.
No, but it's something with all the explanation. It's very difficult. Yet I have seen through the year women that I met in Chicago, that I met here and there, who have learned to just define their own style. It took a few years, and I think that we all designers, the one who go on the road, because of the fashion shows, good or bad, because of the hats or the bad shoes or whatever you show, a woman finally sees something the way the designer wants. It's got to sink in somewhere. So they learn something. I find that the American woman in the last 10 years made an enormous progress in reacting to what we designers show them. For instance, 10 years ago when the mini or the midi came about, they didn't know how to resist, so they bought the mini, never wore them. They bought the midi and had got it down. Today, you don't dictate to the American woman anymore. She look at the thing and she says, no, it's not for me. I'm not going to buy that. I like that. I like the woman to have her own identification with herself, with what she does, you know. And I think that we, in America, the New York designer, have done an awful lot for the American consumer by going to the little city, Oklahoma City, I don't know, Chattanooga, Duluth, whatever. You go and you show your wear. You may never sell anything, but the woman, unless she's a complete, I don't know, I wouldn't call her, I don't know. They learn something. They may say, well, that's not for me. But in the meantime, they have a certain image of what they don't want to look like.
I've always thought that it's summed up by recognizing that what fashion style is all about is the education of your eye. Your eye has to be able to walk into a room and see that the room is marvelous. The excess pillows are superb.
Yeah.
If your eye is sufficiently educated, this comes from enough experience that
Yes,
you've seen and seen. The same thing is true of clothes. I think you're absolutely right. The more she sees,
The
of
more
things
she
that-
knows, at least what, because the reaction to clothes is not to be told by a salesgirl, it's marvelous, buy it. It used to be like this, not any longer.
Oh yes, it used to be the business of the salesperson. I thought of it in terms of Hattie Carnegie, where the technique was always to say, "My dear, this was made for you."
Yeah, well, maybe sometimes. But in those days, people like Hattie Carnegie, they were very few and far between. And so Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Jones, Mrs. whoever it was very lucky to have the knowledge and the taste of Hattie Carnegie or Pauline Potter or people. I mean, I kept the last interview of Pauline de Rothschild, who was, to me, I met her at Carnegie many, many years ago, but I mean, she's dead now. She was that woman who's done something for the French and American-born lady who had, of course, with the money that they have, the Rothschild. I don't know if you remember that interview in Women's Wear, where she trained little girls from the wine, the country, the vineyard next to Bordeaux. She took the girl that she thought would be at the mortist, taught her how to make a bouquet the way she did. Girls who never went to school.
Bouquet of flowers.
Bouquet of flowers. Taking field flowers and making extraordinary thing, and that girl was doing that day after day after day after day. And the way I think this is terribly important. Well, that's something that bothers me, speaking of flowers. Flowers that people send you that are stiff and things. I take them apart immediately.
Yes.
Anyway, at 12 o'clock, I have to leave you because I have an appointment with someone. But
Well,
anyway,
this gives us 15 more minutes of
Good.
good words.
you don't think it's too much?
No, it's terrific. It's terrific. You're saying many, many valuable things.
Really?
Yes, indeed.
Well, good.
Now, go back now, because we've allowed
Yeah.
ourselves the relaxation of drifting a bit into some concepts, which is a good thing to do. But we've now, where we are now is that Trigere has moved to 550, is it, 7th Avenue, and is certainly part of the total fashion establishment in the sense that that's exactly where anybody would go to find the best designers in the American couture and the American ready-to-wear on the top level of design. Now, many designers go on for instance, Bill Blass goes on an organized tour 3 or 4 times a year to relate to his customers. I mean, to find out the lifestyle of his customers. Now, of course, he's a man, therefore, part of that has to be superimposed. He has to really, he can't.
Not really. Not really. Bill is fantastic at it to begin. My favorite remark, he knows because I sent him the article many years ago, is somebody who was asking me something, I forgot what city it was. Do I enjoy traveling? And I said yes. Of course, when I travel, I have to think, where do I go? Is it winter? It doesn't matter, because if it's winter and it can be 105 degrees, if I show a winter collection, I'll wear a winter dress with the furs and the thing that I'm used to it. But I always said that this is the time of my life I want to be Bill Blass. And they said, why? I said, because you will go with his last year flannel jacket or blazer, his black tuxedo, if it's black or navy blue, and maybe one more, and that's it. Nobody's going to come back to him and said, Mr. Blass or Bill, wasn't that like that jacket? Isn't that last year's? 5 years ago, I was in Palm Beach, and a lady came to me and she said, didn't you wear that blue suit last year? I said, I certainly did. It's very funny, but being a man in things like this, it's easier than being a woman. But it's fun to travel. You learn a lot about your customers. You have to. Going into fitting room is a very, very, very valuable thing for anybody. You have to go and see what the clothes, what they do on Mrs. Short Little Mrs. America, what it does. I mean, and it teaches you never to do that waistline again because it's too hard to sell. At least I get that reaction.
Do you get a reaction also on the basis that you must stay on top of what's developing in the society? I was interested that you mentioned Bette Midler. Bette Midler is the... I went to the opening of the Rose.
Yes.
And I left in a state of absolute, almost exhaustion in one sense, because I had the feeling that I had the privilege of seeing not a great movie, but a great star.
Yeah.
The ability of this girl to register on film is extraordinary.
That's what somebody said, that she was probably a better actress than she's even a singer.
Oh, I thought she was absolutely sensational, and I was terribly interested in the relationship of the costumes to the film, but that's a whole other tape. But you obviously recognize that it's important to be identified.
I didn't go to the premiere, which bothered me. I was doing something else. I don't remember what.
The nature of New York is that New York is like the largest smorgasbord in the world.
Oh, but it's terrific.
And you would die if you tried to eat every single dish. There'd be no way in which you could remain alive.
No, but you try to do a few.
Exactly.
You try to taste it.
I've always maintained that, one, you don't have to be at the premiere. It'll play. You can go see it quietly
the movie,
some
yes,
other time.
but I go out a lot, Robert, and it's valuable. I go to premiere as much as I can. If the play is good, I may go again in a year to see it again, but I really go. And I used to love to do the premiere and the dressing. Today nobody dresses anymore, which is one of my greatest sorrow. I don't know why. But I think it's important, for me anyway. I don't go everywhere. I don't go to football games and I don't go to baseball game. I don't understand it. This is a thing I'm completely blocked. But I do go to the concert a lot. And the concert is good for me because while the music plays, my mind designs continuously. It's very strange. My program is, in time of collection, it's full of little notes of what I want to do because I'm not disturbing, I go to the theater a lot.
Is it that the music stimulates the design, or that just
no,
being
it's just
alone
like
and quiet?
It's gardening. Gardening does the same effect to me. You see, gardening and because I don't have to talk. I am with myself. Some kind of a, I hate the word, but it's kind of communion, if you want to. My mind is free, and I plant my tulips, or whatever I plant. Gardening has been very good for me, health-wise too. I think, by the way, speaking of designing, I always say to be a designer today you have to have great stamina. It's a hard work. Everything is hard work, but it's a hard work. You're pressurized 4 or 5 times a year. I mean, the deadlines, it's tough to always do. You are no longer finished. We finished a collection last week. I'm busy buying fabric for next fall, imagine. I mean, I like to go and take a rest, which I will do, I suppose, in December. But I do a lot of things. Museum, I don't go as much as I would like to, but I do, and it's fantastic. I do a lot of things. I don't walk enough in New York.
Do you read?
Oh, yes. 4 or 5 books at a time.
Because I find that I do that. I find
yes.
that I dip into things, I savor them, and I like to think about them. It's interesting, you design when you garden. I don't do that in any sense. What I do with my gardening and my tractor is that I get on them, and whatever I have taken in that past week begins to bubble and edit and sift and simmer and dismiss itself. In other words, that was good, that was valid. Sometimes I latch on to an image that a poet has presented to me.
I read, for instance, last night I didn't sleep at all, so at 4 o'clock I finished almost the Lauren Bacall. I'm late reading it. I just got it for my birthday, so I'm reading that. I got the Kissinger book for my birthday. That will be attacked, not in bed because it's too heavy.
No. And also you can't read it the way you read the book.
No, but I also read the New York Times every morning, first of all. The New York Times first, and the news, and the political thing. I'm not detached from the world. I think it's terribly important. I'm very offended by what the life we have now and the scare and the whole thing. It's a tragic world we're living in now.
It's a period of terrible change, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
Changes are occurring all over the world. I think it is necessary for us to retain some sense of balance that when the French had their revolution and Marie Antoinette lost her head, there was a reason.
There is always a reason.
There's always a reason. And
on the other hand, when you design and you feel that something is not going right in the world, it upsets me, and you never know what can happen. Today, I think, we, at our prices, are directing our wear to the woman who has a certain amount of money. And when the stock market goes down and you have a fashion show that day, you always wonder,
Yes.
It's everything is related.
It's all related.
You cannot detach yourself. I'm going to make clothes vase and I'm going to do this and that's it. You can't work. I can't. Now, what brought an enormous change in my thinking and doing in designing was the traveling. When the planes were available to everybody, all of a sudden the mood of dressing changed too. The trousers came into being, and the reversible coats and all that, the thing that a woman goes to San Francisco for 2 days or 3 days and comes back, goes to Paris and goes with the wardrobe. That influences me a lot, you see.
Well, also, one of the things I've always admired about you is that you have avoided what I call the dinosaur syndrome.
What's that?
The dinosaur syndrome is the person who achieves a level of success and has an audience, has customers, has editorial response, and then refuses to make any change. Whatever happens, they consider themselves an arbiter of taste, an arbiter of fashion. But this is an important point, Pauline, because I can remember you saying at the time that you would not do pants.
I certainly did, and I ate my words.
Yes, but you see, the dinosaur would never change.
I see.
You see, the dinosaur...
I ate my words because I thought it wasn't ladylike. Today I wouldn't have a wardrobe. I'm wearing pants today, and
yes,
I wear... you can't do without pants. Yeah. You can't.
You have to be attuned, I think, in my own head, not only to the obvious changes in the society, but I think if you really are a good artist, if you really are a designer, because I've always maintained that the statement that the artist is ahead of his time the poet is ahead of his time, is not valid. The real truth is that all of us, non-creative people, the mass public, are slightly behind the times. It takes a while for people to catch up to whatever
Yes.
the changes are.
Yes.
It is the creative person who sees in advance. It is like,
For instance,
you made a wonderful statement one time, and I've used it. I've used it a lot. I must tell you, I've always been honest and given you credit, but
Thank
it has to do with Picasso. You said one time that you look at the Picassos that one is familiar with, and you see the distortions, and you see the double images, and you see the oversized heads, and the peculiar noses, and the fabulous, interesting, fascinating, strange use of color. But it is the same man that could draw an absolutely beautiful
always.
portrait.
I was just going to come to the painting thing where I could have bought a Jackson Pollock. I could have bought a Vieira da Silva in Paris for $200. I could have, and I didn't understand it, and I could kick myself, but many, many, many times. I didn't understand it. Today I regret it, but I can't afford them, so that's that. But you change. There are things, for instance, today, if I had the time mostly, the money too, I would probably throw out everything I live with in the apartment and go very modern, very, I don't know. I say that, I don't
Pauline,
know.
I don't think you would. I'll tell you, I know you well enough and I adore you. First of all, one retains the couch, one retains the piano. It isn't that you can't afford to buy another piano or
No,
buy
the
another
piano
couch.
is out of the picture. But the simplification of life is probably something that I'm trying to say when I think of all the turtles and all the things that you have to dust, at least once a week, if not more, the bottle collection, all that. And it's difficult to get people to do that. Sometimes I think, well, maybe I should throw out everything and just be clean. I don't think I would.
I don't think you will. I find that we really, it's very much like work patterns. People really get what they deserve and what they really want in life. They really do. I maintain that.
You think so?
Well, I think levels find levels. In other words, it is, you talk about Hattie Carnegie and the connection is Jean-Louis and Travis Benton and Pauline Trigere, and Lord knows who else might have been involved that did not, for one reason or another, continue to use their talent. But the level of people that would be hired because the eye of Hattie Carnegie was sufficiently skilled to recognize the difference between somebody who was inadequate, inept, fake, had no talent, and the person
Yes.
that did. And I find it's true with friends as well.
Well,
You look around your dinner party table, I look around mine, and you think, ye gods, every single person in this room is somebody who has made an imprint
Well,
and
that's,
influenced lives.
This is the thing that I like to tell the young people, that my life, the fact that I became a known designer and recognized and so on, I love the fact that because of that situation I was able to meet people that are extraordinary. Leonard Bernstein, for instance, who was the first person, to me it was an idol when he came here for dinner after a concert, or supper rather. I was thrilled to pieces. If I meet Mr. Kissinger, it's extraordinary. It came because of whatever, I am terribly grateful to have been able, I don't take it lightly. And I think people who know me enjoy having me in their home, and I think it's fantastic for me that came from absolutely nowhere with an education, all right, maybe. But my position in New York, my American designer statue, has enabled me to meet people that I certainly never dreamt I could even spell the name of.
And the thing that's marvelous that you may not even be aware of is that if I were to talk to Leonard Bernstein, who was an old friend of mine, if I were to talk to a dozen different people that I've seen in this house, most of them would say, isn't it wonderful to go to Pauline's? Isn't it marvelous to be invited there?
Well, that's
Isn't the
nice.
food superb? Isn't the evening charming and enchanting? And it's true, because I remember leaving a dinner party here with Bess Meyerson, And to me, I'm always amused at myself when I'm with Bess because I like her enormously, and I always forget how tall she is.
Yes.
And somehow or other, we in the elevator going downstairs, and she has the great skill of allowing herself to be very feminine in situations
Yes.
like that, and she becomes somebody that you want to take care of. But as we were walking home in New York at this period of time when one is leaving a Trigere party somewhere between 12:30 and 1 o'clock in the morning, and one is a little nervous about what's going on the streets of Manhattan, and I had the feeling if she thinks I'm going to protect her, she's out of her mind, so they're not protecting me. Well, this ends the first of these tapes, and I must tell you, I couldn't be more delighted, because you've said very, very valuable things, but always, as I expect, it is the intelligence that comes through, the ability to
Merci,
articulate.
monsieur.
And we will make our date for the next one, and we will continue the development of all this. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.